Hey y'all, it's Sally Loftis, author of the Fully Human Resources newsletter here on LinkedIn. And today I'm excited to have a special guest who is Brett Loftis, and he is going to take a minute to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Brett Loftis, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Crossnore Communities for Children, which is a child welfare and children's behavioral health nonprofit in Carolina. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Center for Trauma Resilient Communities, which is a national consulting and technical assistance organization helping communities and organizations make a transition to trauma resilience.
Thanks, Brett, for that introduction. I created the Fully Human Resources newsletter on LinkedIn because I feel like so much of humanity is being sucked out of the workplace these days. And one thing that I've noticed is that, a lot of people, especially leaders, are talking about feeling like their employees are exhibiting maybe more stress, extreme fear or panic, sometimes anger. There's like this collective thing happening in the workplace right now. Why do you think people are kind of out of sorts these days?
Well, I really think that a lot of this started prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic really intensified people's personal feelings of trauma and stress, and even toxic levels of stress. And then a lot of other things that were happening at the same time around the pandemic and just after in our society really were showing up and highlighting some existing conditions that were already there, but now are really clear and really intense.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about what you said, that some of this kind of started the pandemic, before the pandemic. So, what are some things that, we can kind of do to settle our bodies, our minds, kind of in our lives right now?
Well, I think part of it is you have to name what's going on. And so one of the things that is happening within our culture is also showing up in our workplaces, and that our folks are exhibiting true symptoms of chronic levels of stress, and some are exhibiting really trauma response behaviors.
Mm.
So if you think of what we know about trauma and how it impacts the body, in that fight, flight, freeze kind of place, and even what we call fawn or collapse, we're seeing some of that in the workplace, and this is normal. So, right? So, our bodies were made to have these kind of traumatic responses in order to protect ourselves. But the problem is when something that rises to the level of kind of a chronic level of stress, really toxic levels of stress, they can have true trauma symptoms where people kind of get stuck, traumatic responses. We saw it in the pandemic, where some people were literally frozen. They didn't know what to do next. Some organizations were frozen and did not know what to do next. Some people went into kind of a fight mode where they wanted to not wear masks and not get vaccines and not do anything to protect themselves. But really, a lot of that was just a trauma response from the stress of the situation. We saw organizations following suit. And unfortunately, we're still seeing some of the ramifications of that now, where people are tired, and people are exhausted post pandemic, and their family members are struggling. We know the levels of existing mental health issues are higher than they have ever been. Some categories we've seen 30 and 40% increases in the need to access behavioral health services, both for youth and for adults. And so, kind of those things combined together with just the overall stress of life and living in a place in our time of society where we have 24-hour news cycles that are really monetized around activating our stress response. Um, all those things are kind of coming into play to create a really perfect, or I would say terrible, soup of anxiety and stress.
So, what are some ways we could potentially kind of decrease the stress, like decrease stress, like on the individual level? Like, what
Yeah.
are some kind of easy activities?
Yeah. I think this is both an individual journey because self-leadership is always at the beginning of anyone's overall wellness. But there's also some things organizations can do. But one is just to identify what's happening. Start to really either through reflective practice where you are journaling or having times of quiet and meditation where you can give your body time enough to calm down to really say what's happening. And the other is to maybe find some safe spaces where you have people that you trust. For some people, that's a therapist or a coach or a mentor. Others is just supportive friends, maybe family members, people who can really, you can talk to about the feelings you're experiencing. Sometimes just naming it and recognizing that you're not alone in that feeling is a very beginning process of breaking some of that down, and trying to rechange and rewrite some of those scripts.
What I heard you say in that, Brett, was that we need to slow down and really prioritize connection in our life and like authentic connection, right? People we can be real with. So it's funny that you say that because I feel like I'm telling a lot of my clients these days, as organizations, they need to slow down and prioritize connection. So, what are some things that organizations, kind of senior leaders, can do to help their employees in this, I guess, current season of whatever's going on?
Well, one is just to acknowledge that we have transitioned to a Zoom culture. And so we can either be in an in-person meeting or a Zoom 24 hours a day. And so there's no more kind of expectation that you're going to have a break between meetings where you maybe go to the bathroom or get a glass of water. Now you can really be in back to back to back. And you hear people saying that all the time. I'm in back to back Zooms. And where Zoom is great for efficiency, it is terrible for connection, because you miss a big part of a lot of what's happening with people around body language, being able to really read people's facial expressions. And we're tired a lot. We have Zoom fatigue because our brains are trying to fill in the gaps by the information we're not getting from all the mirror neuron connections between people that we need. And so planning breaks, scheduling fewer things in a day, really being forcing yourself to prioritize. What is the most important thing for me to do today? And how do I build in time for connection, as it is one of the most important things we can do, whether that's with coworkers, family members, or friends. Having that time to really rejuvenate yourself, and everyone is a little bit different. So knowing yourself and knowing what gives you energy and what takes energy away. For a lot of my introverted colleagues and friends, it is really scheduling time alone with quiet, and quiet with no media. For people like me who have a high extrovert scale, sometimes that's a 5 or 10 minutes that really is all you need to kind of reconnect. But other things kind of come into play, like the balance in life. And so whether you're staying active and connected, that may be in a different form other than work. And this is a great time for supervisors to really remind people. Most organizations have built-in supports for that, like paid time off. And if you are lucky enough to have this in your organization, please help people plan how to use it. Teach folks how to use it. Model it if you're a leader. Please don't expect your staff to take paid time off if you, as a leader, are not modeling that. And that's how culture is built over time, is collective action, that are done with enough repetition that becomes part of the norm of the agency. I really think this is a time when we need to double down on internal supports. That means real reflective supervision with people. Set the tasks aside for the last 20 minutes of supervision. Spend the bulk of the time around connection, planning together for personal goals and professional goals, and then get to the tasks at hand. Continuing to encourage people to use their health insurance. More and more employers are covering mental health care. Even EAP, employee assistant programs, have a certain number of sessions that if you're having work-related stress, that's covered under most EAP plans. Use those resources and encourage your staff to use those resources. I've started taking leadership around my own self-care out loud. So if I'm going to therapy, I say, hey, everyone, I'm going to therapy. I'm leaving. I'll be in 10 minutes. I'm going to therapy. because I'm a CEO and I need my staff to understand that that's part of how I take care of myself. So I can expect them to take advantage of that when they need it also.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Brett. He is so knowledgeable in so many ways and really gives a great leadership perspective on kind of what's happening right now. And for me, what I took away from that is it's nice to know that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one feeling this way. I think also just thinking about like really slowing down, focusing on